Dear students, this is the third part of the chapter Organic Chemistry, some basic principles and techniques for class 11th. In the previous two parts, we have discussed basically about the IUPAC nomenclature of compounds which are aliphatic in nature. Now, in this presentation, we are going to discuss the IUPAC nomenclature of benzene derivatives, which are aromatic compounds. Now, before going further, I would like to discuss quickly that how we write the IUPAC nomenclature. In a way, it's a recap. IUPAC nomenclature of the compounds which we have already discussed in the previous class. So let us take a few examples quickly. Suppose you have a compound like CH3, CH, Cl, CH2, Br. Haloalkane we call it. So when I have to write the name, I will start numbering from the side from where the substituents are coming closer. And then I'll write alphabetically. So name becomes 1 bromo, 2 chloro, and in continuation with this you have the name of the parent compound propane. It will be a single word, this together. Let's take more examples. If I take CH3, CHO, very simple, it's an aldehyde. So I will be writing the name ethanol. Ethanol is the name, right? If I have CH3, C double bond O, CH2, it's clearly a ketonic functional group right now, and CHO. Now in this one, I have two functional groups, ketone and aldehyde. If you see the priority series, aldehyde gets more preference. So the compound is 1, 2, 3, 4, butanol with ketonic group on the third carbon. So we use the prefix keto or oxo. So name is 3-oxo butanol. Simple. Same way, if I have to write the name, let us take something unusual. You know that for ketone there has to be such a compound where the C double bond O is in the middle of two carbons. So you should have at least 3 carbons, and this is clearly propanol. But suppose I take an example, unusual one, and this is attached to benzene. We are going to discuss the benzene derivatives in this. I'm just taking this example. It came to my mind when I was talking about ketones. So I thought of discussing it first. In this compound, you have C double bond O in the middle of two carbons. So it is also a ketone. But it is not the simple ketone, not the usual one. You have benzene on one side, and you have the C double bond O in the side chain which is attached to benzene. So if there is a ketone with 2 carbons, ideally it should be called ethanone, but ethanone is not possible in such compounds, but here it is possible. So that's why I'm calling it unusual. So what do we call it? We will call it, on the first carbon you have benzene, and when benzene is considered a substituent, we use the term phenyl. So when I use the term phenyl for this, how do I write the name? The name of the compound will be 1-phenyl. This is phenyl ethanone. This is the name. Then if I have an example like CHO, the compound has only 2 carbons and both are aldehydes. The functional groups are aldehydes. So I will follow the rule. Total number of carbons 2. So it has to be eth, right? Ethane. But you have both the aldehydes. So it is ethane diol. Two aldehydes. Ethane diol. Here you will not drop this E because Re is coming in between. So ethane diol is the name. If you have CHO, CH2, CHO, simple, it is propane 1,3-diol. Now I am taking more such examples quickly. If you have something like CHO, CH2, CH, another CHO, CH2, another CHO. So you have these three functional groups here, same functional group thrice. Now if I take the straight chain, I can count this and this carbon in the straight chain of the main functional group. This will be left out. So I cannot do so. The rule says that if the same functional group is present more than once, we have to give the same treatment to the functional group everywhere. So either there has to be a way by which I can include all the carbons of CHOs in the main chain. That is not possible here. So the other possibility is I will leave all of them in the main chain and I will consider this as the main chain. 3 carbons, propane. Now in propane I am counting 1, 2, 3 carbons. I am not able to count the carbons of these 3 functional groups. So I will write propane 1, 2, 3. All the 3 carbons are having CHO functional group. So we call it carbaldehyde. When you're not able to count the carbons, the term is carbaldehyde. Propane 1, 2, 3 tricarbaldehyde. If there is a cyclic compound, CHO. Now I cannot, this is cyclohexane. I cannot call it cyclohexanal because then I am counting the 6 carbons of the cyclic structure, but this one is not counted. I cannot even call it cycloheptanal because the cyclic part has only 6 carbons. So here also use the same technique. What do you have to do? You have to call it carbaldehyde. So this becomes cyclohexane carbaldehyde. As simple as that. I am taking one more example. If you have carboxylic acid, you simply see the number of carbons and you call it. If I take 3 carbons, it will be propanoic acid. If I take both the terminal carbons as the functional groups, so it will be butane 1, 4, because 1, 2, 3, 4, I am able to count 4 carbons like this. So it is butane 1, 4 dioic acid. Now here also, if you take the same example, you have 3 carbons. Each carbon is having a COH on it, and I am not able to count the carbons of the functional group in the main chain. What do? I will simply take this as the main chain, propane, and the term used for COH, if you have not already counted the carbons, is carboxylic acid. So propane 1, 2, 3 tricarboxylic acid is the name for this compound. So these were slightly different, unusual compounds, so I discussed. Now let's start with the nomenclature of substituted benzene compounds. Now benzene is C6H6, which is having a cyclic structure, and there are 3 alternate double bonds that we all know. Now benzene derivatives means the compounds which have been derived from benzene. How? By putting a substituent on it, and substituent comes after a chemical reaction only. Right now we are just discussing the IUPAC. So this compound is called methyl benzene because you can see there is methyl on it, CH3 group. Here it is OMe. OMe is OCH3. For methyl, they have written Me. So if it is with oxygen, we call it methoxy. So the name of the compound becomes methoxybenzene. Here it is NH2 group, amino group, aminobenzene. And you have NO2 group, which is nitro group, so nitrobenzene. And then this is bromobenzene. Same way, if I take chloro, it becomes chlorobenzene. So whatever atom or group you are putting on benzene on any carbon, that will decide the name. So benzene is always written in the end, as you can see in all of them, because that is the parent compound and these are the substituents on it. Now you will notice that there are some names written in brackets. For methyl benzene, toluene is written. For methoxybenzene, anisole is written. For aminobenzene, aniline is written. These are common names, trivial names. But for these compounds specifically, they are also universally used. They are also very commonly used. So you will find them written everywhere, wherever you come across these compounds. So both are considered. Like phenol, phenol is benzene with OH. This is phenol, and this name is used as it is in IUPAC nomenclature also. Another interesting term, another interesting name used for phenol is, for this phenol, carbolic acid. Phenol is also called carbolic acid. Don't get confused between this and carbonic acid, that is H2CO3. I'm talking about phenol. Phenol has this name, carbolic acid. Okay. Then you may have two substituents also. So if you have two substituents like both bromo, then you go clockwise or anti-clockwise starting from any of them, any of the carbons which are having substituent on them, and give the lowest possible number to the carbons bearing the substituents on them. So if I go this way 1 2, or I come this way 1 2, it is same. So I will call it 1 2 dibromobenzene. Simple. This is 1 3 dibromobenzene. You come this way or this way, it remains 1 4 dibromobenzene. Now when you have three functional groups, or you have three substituents, I should say, on the benzene ring. So this is clearly the functional group. This has more priority than the alkyl groups. So the compound is, parent compound is phenol. And the two methyl groups are the substituents on it. So it is 3,4 dimethyl phenol. How 3,4? Because I have to go clockwise or anti-clockwise anyhow, that I can give the lowest possible number to the carbons having the substituent. Suppose I come like this. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these carbons which are having CH3s, they are getting 4 and 5 number. So I will not come this way. I will come from the other side, this side, because then they are getting 3 and 4. So this is 3,4 dimethyl phenol. More examples. Cl and two nitro groups are attached. So if I come like this 1 2 3 4, I have to start numbering from the carbon which is having a substituent. Some students have this habit that they always give number 1 to this carbon which is on top. No, that is a wrong way of doing it. Never ever do it. You just see where the attachment is, where the substituent is. Generally we get, like if I have to draw phenol, you generally get this structure. But if you draw the structure like this is also phenol. So on any carbon you have that substituent which is making it phenol. Same way here, 1, 2, 3, 4. One way is this. So it becomes 1 chloro 2 4 dinitrobenzene. Another way of doing it, let us see whether that works or not. If I start numbering from here, start from any carbon which is having the substituent, 2, 3, 4. Now you have 4 chloro, okay, 1,3 dinitro. It is violating alphabetical order also. Chloro should come first. So if from both the sides I am getting same numbers, then I will give the lowest possible number to the one having chloro, that is coming alphabetically first. But in this case I am not getting even same numbers from both the side. Here I am getting 1, 3, 4. There I was getting 1, 2, 4. So this is a better option. So this is the wrong name. Okay. Then you have nitro and Cl and CH3. Now, if somebody says that I want to start numbering from here, this will not work because I go clockwise or anti-clockwise. One of the carbons having a group attached to it, substituent attached to it, is going to have a large number. Here, if I go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm getting 1, 2, 5. If I come the other way, if I come from this nitro, 1, 2, 3, 4, I am getting 1, 3 and 4. One option was this, another combination is this. So which is better? If you have to give it a name, then which is better combination out of these two? Then we will try more. So here, if I go start from here, from the middle, from this carbon which is having Cl, because it comes to my mind that the carbon having Cl, the chloro will come first, so let me give it the lowest possible number. These are the two possible combinations of numbers I am getting. Okay, let's try one more. I will start numbering from this carbon. So I was getting 1, 2, 5 and 1, 3, 4 combinations. Now we'll number from here 1, 2, 3, 4, because you can start from any carbon which is having the substituent and go clockwise or anti-clockwise anyhow. So it will be 1, 2 and 4. Now out of these, which is giving you the lowest sum? This one. It will be 7. It will be 8. It will also be 8. So I choose this. So the name is 2-chloro 1-methyl 4-nitrobenzene. I will not choose 4-methyl 5-chloro-nitrobenzene. Okay. The lowest sum rule. This is how you name them. I hope you are getting it now. Now this compound, you have a methoxy group, you have Cl group, you have CH3. So 1 to 4 is the best option. So I go like this 1 to 4 and the name is 2-chloro 4-methyl and any sol. Benzene with OCH3 is any sol. So they are using this name. If you don't want to use any sol, you can write methoxy also, methoxy benzene. Here they are making use of aniline. NH2 with benzene is aniline. So the name is 4-ethyl 2-methyl aniline. Two more examples. Let's try them quickly. Whenever you have functional group in the side chain, till here we have done examples where functional groups were attached to benzene. Now these two examples, the functional group is in the side chain OH. It is not attached to benzene. They are not phenols clearly. They are alcohols. So this carbon and this carbon, two carbons in the side chain. There is OH. It should be ethanol. But in ethanol, on the first carbon, I am calling it first because it is having OH in it. Take it like this. Two carbons. On the first carbon you have benzene. And the same carbon you have OH. And then you complete the 4 bonds. So the name of the compound, this compound is going to be, if I number like 1 and 2, I told you whenever we have to treat this as a substituent, we call it phenyl. So the name is 1-phenyl ethanol, single word. I'll write it again in case it is not visible. The name is 1,1,2 phenyl ethanol. And here again you have two carbons in the side chain. So this is the first carbon, it has OH on it, and the second carbon is this one. I hope you can give me the name for this now. You can try it yourself. Okay. Exactly like this, try this one. Next, it's a question from NCRT. Let us do it quickly on the basis of whatever we have done till now. The structural formula of the compounds we have to write. So we start with the first one. The first is orthoethyl anisole. So if I remember, anisole is benzene with OCH3, methoxybenzene. And ortho, para, meta, there are three terms used. Ortho, meta, para. These are not used in IUPAC name, they are used in common naming only. So if you already have a substituent on benzene, the next two positions, they are ortho. Next to that, two positions are meta. This is with respect to this. And the exactly opposite, para. Keeping this in mind, if I now try to write the name, it's going to be the structure, if I try to draw the structure, I know that this is anisole. And ortho position, any position next to this and this, both are ortho. So on any one position out of this, you put ethyl. That's the structure. Okay, this is for the A part. Simple. Let's try B part. Para-nitroaniline. Now whatever is there in the end, that is the parent compound. Draw that first. Aniline is benzene with NH2. Ortho positions, meta positions, para position. So I have to put nitro at para. This is aniline and this is nitro, NO2. Done. This is for P part. Third is 2,3-dibromo 1-phenylpentane. Now pentane is the parent compound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I start numbering from any side, suppose I start numbering from the left hand side, the compound is having 2,3-dibromo. Br here and Br here. 1-phenyl. On first you have benzene. And then you complete the 4 bonds of each carbon. CH2, CH, CH, CH2, CH3. This is C part. This is how we draw it. Now the last, D part. 4-ethyl 1-fluoro-nitrobenzene, parent compound. Benzene with nitro group. 2 nitro, so I will number it 2. Then on any side there will be 1 adjacent to it. On 1 you have to put fluoro. And 1, 2, 3, 4. This must be 4 then if I am coming like this. So here I have to put ethyl. So very easy to draw the structures from the name if you understand the basic thing, the rules, how names are given. Okay. Now, isomerism, the next topic. Isomerism is the phenomenon of existence of different isomers. Isomers have same molecular formula, exactly same molecular formula, but they have different structural formula and which is affecting their properties. So if you see the flow diagram, isomerism is divided into 2 parts. Structural isomerism, stereoisomerism. Structural isomerism again has 4 parts. Chain isomerism, let's see the examples one by one. What is chain isomerism? If I have pentane, we call it N-pentane, normal straight chain pentane. The same, the formula, molecular formula would be C5H12, right? Same C5H12 can be drawn like this also. Another example. This is 2-methylbutane. So these are isomers. What is the difference? Here I have a straight chain, no branching, but here you can see a branch on the chain. So this is chain isomerism. Straight chains and branch chains. Next is position isomerism. Now in position isomerism, what happens in position isomerism? You have propane 1-ol and propane 2-ol. So you can see very clearly that the position of functional group is different. Here it is on the first carbon, here it is on the second carbon. So they are position isomerism, position isomers. They are exhibiting position isomerism. That means the position of the functional group will change. Then you have a functional group isomerism. like propanol and propanol, aldehyde and ketone. If you see their formula C3, 3 carbons, H6O, they have this molecular formula, both of them. But one is aldehyde and one is a ketone. So they have different functional groups now. That's why functional isomerism. The last is we are talking about the structural isomers. So we talked about chain isomerism, position isomerism, and functional isomerism. The last in this category is metamerism. If you take ethers, ROR, you can see on both the sides of the functional group there are R groups. So if you have 2 carbons on one side, 2 on the other, ethoxyethane. Or I can put 1 carbon on one side and remaining 3 on the other. The size of R group is changing. So when you have different R groups on both the sides of the functional group as explained here, they are called metamers. Then you have stereoisomerism. Stereoisomerism is basically, the term stereo is related to space. So whenever you have the different relative positions of the atoms or groups attached to the central atom, whenever you have different compositions, different orientations in space, 3D, they are called stereoisomers. And this is called stereoisomerism, which is of two types, geometrical and optical, which will be discussed in class 12th in detail. And geometrical isomerism is being discussed in the next chapter for alkenes also. So that we will discuss there only. So this was in general about the isomers. Now something very important related to any reaction, chemical reaction, the organic chemistry we are doing. So under that, the different reactions which are taking place, they have a specific way of proceeding depending what conditions you are providing, whether you are heating it or providing light, depending upon the type of reactants that you have. So that stepwise explanation of any reaction, how the reaction is taking place, that's called mechanism. In general, what happens in every reaction, there is organic molecule which we call substrate. Some attacking reagent is there which is coming and attacking on it. We get an intermediate, something which is not stable. That's why it is formed between the reactants and products. It is not the final thing. And then it takes you to the final thing, that means products and the byproducts. So what is a reaction mechanism? It's a sequential account of each step, describing details of electron movement, that how one electron moved from somewhere to some other place, how a lone pair was offered, and what are the energetics involved. That means bonds are breaking, new bonds are forming, which is more stable. The rate of reaction, means the speed of the reaction, that comes under kinetics. So everything keeping in mind, we discuss the stepwise mechanism of the reactions, which is a very important integral part of organic chemistry. So we'll be doing that. But before that, we have to understand that for every reaction, you have reactants which are giving you products. In between, a stage comes when the bonds of reactants are not completely broken and bonds of products to give rise to products, the new bonds are not completely formed. That we call intermediate. Intermediate is basically the transition state, that is taking you from the reactants to products. But one thing is clear, that for every reaction, the bonds in reactants have to break. Initially, if the new bonds are to be formed, old bonds have to break. So that breaking is very important for a reaction to proceed. And this breaking of bond is also called fission of a bond. Breaking is fission. So there are two ways of doing it, depending upon the conditions. Heterolytic cleavage, heterolytic fission of the bond. Hetero means different. So if there is electron pair here, carbon and bromine, they shared the electron, one electron each. So when the electron pair is to be shifted, why? Because this is more electronegative. I will show the arrow like this. Br is taking electrons, converting to bromide ion, and this is converting to something called a carbocation. Whenever you have a positive charge on a carbon, that species is called carbocation. So why is it formed? Because this is heterolytic cleavage. Hetero means different. Both the atoms which were involved in the bond, they are not getting same share of electrons which were shared. This is taking both the electrons which were getting shared because it has more power. It was more electronegative. And carbocations can be of three types: primary, secondary, tertiary. If you have CH3 plus methyl carbocation, or you have CH3 CH2 plus ethyl carbocation, they come in the category of primary, because you have to see the carbon which is having the positive charge. If that is attached to one more carbon or no other carbon, we call it primary. Then you have C CH3 CH3 positive here. Now the carbon which is involved in, which is having the positive charge, is attached to two more carbons directly. So it is secondary. Now don't take it like this, that you have a carbon which is attached to two R groups and they have to be methyl only. No. You can have a long chain of carbon. In the middle somewhere you have a carbon with positive charge. Again you have a long chain. But if you see it carefully, then you have only these two carbons directly attached to the carbon having a positive charge. So it is secondary. The size of carbon chain does not matter. Just look at the carbon which is attached, which is having the positive charge, to how many carbons is it attached directly. So these are the examples of secondary. Then if I show you the tertiary, one carbon with a positive charge, C, C and C. It may be CH3, it may be ethyl, it may be propyl, or maybe methyl only, any R group. Look at the carbon having positive charge. It is attached to 1, 2, 3 carbons directly. So this is tertiary. That's what is explained here, alkyl groups which are directly attached. They will help you in deciding. Now the stability of carbocations. The stability of carbocations can be explained using two effects. One is inductive effect and the other is hyperconjugation. That will come in the upcoming presentation. So we'll be doing the details there. But to give you some idea that how to quickly decide. This is methyl. So generally they don't put it in any category, and in some of the books you will find they are calling it primary. So this is a specific example, methyl. In general, primary, secondary, tertiary, depending upon how many carbons are directly attached to the carbon having a positive charge. Now see the stability order. It is like this. Tertiary is most stable. Primary is least stable. Why? Because the carbon which is having a positive charge has electron deficiency. It is in the need of electron. And you know that alkyl groups are electron donating in nature. So here you have only one alkyl group. Here you have two alkyl groups. In the tertiary you have three alkyl groups. So if there are three groups which can shift electron density towards the carbon which is in deficiency, definitely more stability will come here. Here there are two groups to help. Here there is only one group in the primary. That's why this is the stability order of carbocations. And the carbocation, the orbital which is not having electron, because that's why positive charge is coming, that is empty. So the hybridization of this carbon is sp2, because if I take the example CH3 with a positive charge, so it has only 3 sigma bonds. That means sp2 hybridized, and it is trigonal planar in shape. sp2 is directly related to trigonal planar. Heterolytic cleavage can give rise to carbanion also. Depends to what the carbon is attached. Now in this example, this is attached to Z. And suppose Z is something which is a metal, highly electropositive, that can never have a negative charge on it. So the electron density in heterolytic cleavage will go to this carbon. So you will get a negative charge here. This is carbanion. Now it's very easy to understand that the stability order of carbanions will be exactly opposite. Primary most stable, then secondary, and the least will be tertiary. Because this is already having extra electrons, that's why negative charge. And in primary there will be just one R group attached to this carbon. In secondary, two R groups which are ready to give more electrons to this C. But this carbon is already having extra electron. So if you have a negative charge, There have to be some groups which can take away electron density. We call them electron withdrawing groups. If there are electron donating groups, they have to be the very less in number. In primary, just one alkyl group, which is electron donating. Here you have two, here you have three. So the tertiary would be the least stable. And the organic reactions which proceed through heterolytic bond cleavage, or I should call it heterolytic fission, they are called ionic or heteropolar or just polar reactions. Why? Because you are getting positive and negative poles developed. So we call it polar reactions. The next is homolytic cleavage. Homo means same. So where the species, the starting material, whatever atoms are bonded to each other, they have equal probability, equal capability of taking away their one electron back. So that's why half arrow. They are taking equal number of electrons back, one each. So that will be reflected here as a dot. This dot is not showing extra electron, it is their own electron. Like, take an example, you have CH3, Cl. They have shared one electron each. Now, when the bond breaks, this will take away its electron, half arrow, this will take away its electron. This happens in the presence of light. So, it will be giving you CH3 dot plus Cl dot. Now, this dot is its own electron which it had shared earlier. Now, in the presence of light, it has broken. Homolytic fission has taken place. So, I am using half-headed, which this is also called fish hook curved arrow. I am using it to show that they are taking equal number of electrons, half electron. I am not showing the complete arrow like this because the conditions are such. I am providing light. In the presence of light, the bond is breaking like this. So, this is whenever you have this dot, they are called free radicals. So, we have talked about three intermediates right now: carbocation, carbanion, and free radicals. Now, free radicals, when you look at this dot, you may have a feeling that this is electron rich. It has extra electron. No, they are electron deficient. Because if you look at the carbon, this carbon has made 3 bonds. So, 6 electrons in the 3 bonds. 1, 2, 3. And this is the 7th electron. Its octet is incomplete. So, they are electron deficient. So, their order of stability will be exactly like carbocation because they are also electron deficient. So, that's why this order. We'll discuss it again when we talk about hyperconjugation and inductive effect in the next presentation. But here it is exactly like carbocation. Why am I saying so? Because here you have one R group to help this electron deficient carbon, 2 R groups, 3 R groups. So same way, if the something is having some deficiency and there are more number of groups to help, then that gives more stability. Organic reactions which are proceeding by homolytic fission, they are called free radical or homopolar or non-polar reactions. Then something very interesting, nucleophiles and electrophiles. As the name suggests, if you are talking about a nucleophile, it is something which is nucleus seeking, nucleus loving, and nucleus is positively charged. So that means this nucleophile which is coming must be negatively charged, or it may be neutral, but it should be electron rich. Only then it can search for something which has a positive charge. That means electron deficiency, right? So by definition, a reagent that brings an electron pair to the reactive site, you can see this Nu with 2 electrons, that is nucleus seeking. That is called a nucleophile. And examples are like cyanide, Cn with a negative, anything with a negative charge is clearly nucleophile. But there are examples like water. It's neutral, but there are 2 lone pairs on oxygen. Ammonia, 1 lone pair on nitrogen. So they are also nucleophiles because they have the presence of lone pairs on them. A reagent that takes away an electron pair, that means electron seeking, which is in the need of electron loving, that will be electrophile, E with a positive charge. Now, same thing, it may have a positive charge like H plus, or it may have a formula like BCl3 neutral, but this is also electrophilic because its octet is incomplete. So it is in the need of more electrons. So these come in the category of electrophiles. They may be neutral, they may be charged, and movement of electron pair is always to be shown with the help of arrow. Understand that also clearly. If I am showing a nucleophile is attacking somewhere, so you have to show the arrow starting from this. Tail should be here and head should be where it is going to attack on a carbon or anywhere. Why? Because this is electron rich. So tail of the arrow is always at the electron rich species. And if you have an electrophile, this is reacting with something, so you have to show the arrow like this, because this is already electron deficient. It is seeking electrons, but it cannot attack in this way. That attack means offering electron. That is not possible for an electrophile. So the tail of the arrow should always be at electron rich site, and head should be towards the electron deficient site. Simple simple questions based on this. I'll quickly go through them. Solved examples from NCERT. You have to use the curved arrow notation to explain the bond breaking. So here it has to be sulfur is more electronegative, it will shift like this. You get this and this. Here cyanide is more electronegative than carbon. Nitrogen is more electronegative. It has a triple bond with carbon and cyanide. So electrons will shift here, both the electrons. Full arrow we are showing. So we are getting a carbocation and cyanide ion. Here it's a metal, copper. Copper or any other metal can never have a negative charge. So it is always going towards carbon. That will be a carbanion and copper ion. You have to justify and categorize them as nucleophiles and electrophiles. So very clearly I can see negative charge, negative charge, negative charge. These are clearly nucleophiles, nucleus seeking. Right. Then you have positive charge in this, positive charge here and positive charge here. They are very clearly electrophiles. They are in the need of electron. Now we are left with this and BF3. Now BF3 is electron deficient. It has only 6 electrons around boron. The octet is not complete. So this comes in the category of electrophile. It needs more electron. Here you can see lone pair. So this comes in the category of nucleophile. In spite of being neutral, they can offer their electron. So this is how you justify and decide. Last question, very interesting. Electrophilic center. This term may confuse if you do not understand it right now properly. What is electrophilic center in the following? So see CH3CHO. In CH3CHO, this carbon will develop a positive charge. Why? Because it is attached to oxygen, which is highly electronegative in comparison to carbon. So if this carbon is developing a positive charge and it has to behave as an electrophile, so through which atom it's going to make a bond with something which is electron rich? Through this carbon. So the starred carbon, they are electrophilic centers. They are electron deficient. Same way CH3CN, this carbon which is in cyanide, that is attached to more electronegative nitrogen. So this will behave as electrophilic center. In CH3I, there is only one carbon and this is having the positive charge because it is attached to more electronegative iodine. So this is how you decide that what is behaving as electrophilic center in a particular molecule. So that's all about this presentation. In the next one, we are going to discuss in detail about the electron displacement effects and how to use them in reasoning questions. That's all for now. See you with the next presentation soon. I hope my presentations will help you. Thank you.